The U.S. trade deficit widened in July to $42 billion.
Meanwhile, the U.S. trade deficit with the rest of the world widened to $45 billion in May. That is the highest in 6 months.
America's trade gap with the rest of the world swelled in June.
Economy on trade balance, the deficit actually expanding slightly in the month of September.
As we look to China right now, China owning nearly $1 trillion in our debt, major trade imbalances.
The ones who created them into an economic power in which they could then loan money back to the United States.
If you look at what countries like China are doing to this country, they are eating our lunch. We're building China. We are really building China because everything we make is made in China or other countries. It's not made here. We don't make things anymore.
I think you're going to start to see the counterbalance in this part of the world all be China and New Zealand. I hope you like Chinese food, James Cameron, because I think you're about to have a lot of it.
Is the trade deficit a bad thing? The U.S. trade deficit has been steadily declining since the early 1970s and is considered by some to be a troubling indicator of the health of our economy. Phrases like "China owns the U.S." stirs the fear of the public, and statements like this are misguided. The fact of the matter is that not everyone can be in surplus, and not everyone would want to. One country's trade surplus is another's trade deficit. You can't have a surplus without creating a deficit. That is to say, you can't eliminate all deficits unless you eliminate all surpluses. And unless we want to close our borders to trade, or centrally plan our imports and exports to equal zero, then let's try to understand if a lunch is being eaten, and if so, by whom. Let's establish something from the outset. Nobody is forcing U.S. businesses to buy foreign goods. The deficit is a result of free, voluntary trade. U.S. businesses are looking at their dollars and thinking, I'd rather have 1,400 widgets from China. Meanwhile, China is looking at its widgets and wishing they could turn them into dollars. If trade is voluntary, it is necessarily win-win for the traders. If trade is win-win, then who's eating whose lunch? If the question is who's eating, chances are it's the USA. But all jokes aside, we are consuming China's goods, not the other way around. We are eating their lunch, but we are also paying for it. Literally paying for it. We trade them our money for their goods. Now, they have our money. They have our money. They have our money! Let's first be clear about what they have. We are not sending boatloads of Benjamins over to foreign businesses to pay for our goods. Rather, the Federal Reserve is crediting the dollar accounts of the foreign businesses. Or more simply, we gave them some digits for widgets. So yes, they have our money. But the point is that it hasn't even cost us the 12.5 cents to print the dollar. We just traded real stuff for virtual money, and that's a pretty good trade. For us. But that's not the end of the story, because virtual money has real implications. First, they have it. Second, we don't. When foreign businesses have our dollars, they have two options: spend them on something priced in US dollars, or save them. They can also trade them for foreign currency, but then the person who receives the dollars in trade has the same conundrum: spend or save. If all of those dollars are spent on American goods, then there is no trade deficit. But that is not the case. Our trading partners are saving our money. And since they have it, we don't. Our economy runs on spending. Every dollar spent is someone else's income. That income drives more spending, and sales increase. If a business has increasing sales, they hire more help, and that creates jobs. Another way to look at it is money spent becomes someone else's income, while money saved does not. Spending is the lifeblood of our economy, and saving makes us anemic. If money is being saved overseas, how can we compensate for it here at home? Just like a patient who has lost too much blood, our economy needs a transfusion of spending. But where does it come from? Actually, that is one way to do it. You could saddle your people with credit card debt, car loans, home equity loans, and have your businesses go into debt for good measure. After all, loans create money. There is. Government can spend money it doesn't have. Well, you could just be content with an anemic economy and chronic high unemployment. Actually, there isn't. Either your people are in debt, your government is in debt, or you run a trade surplus, and not everyone can be in surplus. You might ask why we have to be the ones in deficit, and we don't. But need we remind you that we're currently trading digits for widgets? On average, we spend a portion of our day consuming goods we did not produce. The flip side of that is spending a portion of our day producing goods that we will never consume. This is what's happening in China right now. So what do we do? It may not sound like a good idea, but the government has a long history of spending more than it has. Let's remind ourselves who issues the dollar. Our government. Therefore, our government cannot default on any loan it receives in dollars, because it can always create more. With no risk of default, our government pays less interest than the private sector would for the same amount of debt. Government debt issued in its own sovereign currency is simply less risky than private debt. Alright, so we trade goods for dollars. Those dollars are saved abroad, and the government supplements those dollars by injecting new ones into the economy. But what happens when the dollars come back? First off, the deficit has been a relatively slow and steady process. There's no reason to suspect it will be reversed overnight. Over time, foreign entities will look at their dollars and think, I'd rather have widgets. They'll find someone in the US producing widgets and make them an offer. As US exports of widgets increase, US jobs in widget production also increase. These extra sales in widgets begin to eat away at the deficit. Dollars start flowing back in. If the government injects money into the economy to temporarily replace that which is being saved, then when that money comes out of savings, the government needs to take back what it originally spent. What this looks like in real life is that when we have a trade deficit, the government will go into deficit to inject money back in. When we have a trade surplus, the government pulls out its injection to pay off its debt and go into surplus itself. One final fear to qualm. If foreigners collect our money, won't they eventually be able to buy everything of ours? Answer: only what is for sale in dollars. When playing Monopoly, you can never acquire enough Monopoly money to buy the table you're playing on because it's not for sale in Monopoly money. Likewise, no foreign entity can buy that which we do not wish to sell. Let's review. First, we are eating their lunch. Second, they are saving our dollars. Third, when dollars are saved, the cycle of spending is interrupted. Fourth, spending leads to income, increasing sales, increasing jobs. Fifth, our government can spend into this cycle to sustain it until those dollars come home. And it can't default in the meantime. When those dollars come home, our government can save them out of circulation. Finally, the rest of the world can never buy what we don't wish to sell. We just need to be aware of what we put a price tag on.